I have a mystery story this morning. It's very, very exciting. Yeah. So I'm gonna, nope. I'm gonna bring us. We're live on the interwebs right now. I'm just gonna send us out right now. But
Cool.
it's a fascinating story that I can't wait to get into. We got 20 seconds, so I'm gonna grab my iPad. I'll be right back.
Okay.
My earring fell out. That's terrible. All right. Super exciting. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 3 seconds. Hi, chat room. Hi, everybody. Hello. Coffee. Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program mega worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, actor, comedian, and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
Well, welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us today. Johnny Million, how you doing this fine morning?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you.
You seem to be equipped with something. Is that a guitar in your lap, or are you just happy to see me? No. You were just show everybody in the chat. Yeah, he finally got it. It was going to be, Yeah, the Ace Frehley circa Rock Soldiers Frehley's Comet guitar has arrived in Johnny Million's hands, and he will be making magic with it on his live stream. It's Johnny Million on
already happened once.
Twitch and YouTube. Oh, well, I'm sorry I missed out on it. Please send me a video of the.
I will. I'll send you the clip.
Yeah. So real quick, as we get into the story, I don't know if you know this, but I'm in Texas right now because everybody's in Texas.
I just heard.
Trump is in Texas. Biden's in Texas. Millions of people are in Texas that are not supposed to be in Texas, apparently. And I got to say, there is one of the most peculiar stories that happened in Texas. And I think it was like just the beginning of the week, maybe 10 days ago, a little under. That's really kind of gone by under the radar. And I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention because I find it, to quote our Chicago brethren, hinky. I find the entire thing to be quite hinky. By the way, Philip,
I want to real quick thank Hal and Hal Vickery, Berkeley, and Bobby, and all these crazy super chats that are coming in.
Oh, bless you guys! Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and Lisa Mia Moore gifted a bunch of memberships right away.
You guys, thank you so much. Yeah, we're a little behind because I have not. I've been doing extra long shows and odd timings on my show lately, so I'm very behind on like memberships and super chats and subscriptions because I always forget to talk about that stuff. As a professional streamer. It's the area where I'm still a complete amateur, and I apologize. But thank you guys so much. You're really helping us out. That said, okay, there have been a few areas where I think a lot of other people are sort of surprisingly shocked at Trump's racism on occasion. I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be, right? But I'm like,
it is really surprising.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, wow, all right, sure. That's say
that out loud.
Yeah, that's the way you're going to go with it. Sure. Now, there's the stupid form of his racism, which is the stuff where he talks about how many languages are coming across the border, and nobody even speaks these languages, which obviously, if no one speaks a language, then it's just noise coming out of your mouth. It's not really, even you aren't speaking a language, because a language, I don't know if this might shock people, has to involve at least two people.
At least two people.
For it to be a language, as opposed to just mouth noise. Right?
Yeah, I feel like maybe I should invent a language and say that it's a lost tongue of like pre-indigenous people, the aliens, you know.
Well, that's I think oftentimes that isn't that what Trump does when he screws up, when he messes up some
That's
sort
how
of
you backpedal.
yeah, that's really they want you to pronounce it Burmesia, and then blame other people. Right. Okay. One of the areas though, um, where he, I like when he says peekaboo James, when he is obviously using a derivation of a racial epithet that also ends in boo, that he's trying to like wink and a nod, sneak by everybody. That grosses me out. That's one of the few areas where I'm like, it goes beyond just dumb or gross or cute to like genuinely horrifying, right?
Oh yeah.
Because I don't get offended, I get horrified. Right?
Yeah.
For the record. So the other area is how he has treated Elaine Chao, oddly enough. Yeah,
What?
His former transportation secretary, who is married to Mitch McConnell,
That's
right?
who you attack.
And he has these weird kind of anti-China ways of attacking her. Over like calling her Coco Chow and other stuff. It's like very weird. I don't know if it's a relation to like Cocaine Mitch and all that stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So, by the way, big news, of course, was that Mitch McConnell is stepping down this November as minority leader. Whether he's leaving office or not, I don't know. But he's definitely stepping down as minority leader this year. And that was a big piece of news, right, in the last week. There was also another big piece of news. So Elaine Chao, you'll be familiar with the idea that the reason why Cocaine Mitch became a thing was because Mitch McConnell is married to Elaine Chao, and Elaine Chao's family has this shipping company that at one point, one of their ships was kind of pulled over for speeding, and there was a bunch of coke in the trunk, essentially. They were trafficking cocaine or carrying it, or there was enough of it where it warranted more than just somebody, stowing something away or sneaking something on board, that it looked like a coordinated effort. It became a bit of news for a while, hashtag Cocaine Mitch and all that stuff. You'll recall that, I guess. All right.
I do kind of remember that.
Yeah. So, the and that was related to Lane Chao and was kind of, that was a bit of this mini scandal that happened around her as the transportation secretary married to the majority leader who's working in the White House. One of her ships that's owned by her family is trafficking cocaine. So transportation secretary, transportation, cocaine, kind of it's just bad optics, I would say. All right. So, I don't know if you know this, but Elaine Chao has a younger sister. Had a younger sister, I should say, named Angela Chao. And Angela Chao, within days of, slightly before after Mitch McConnell stepping down and announcing that he's stepping down as minority leader, died. She died here in Texas, where I am, under mysterious circumstances on a ranch owned by Mitch McConnell. Angela Chao either did herself in by driving her car backwards into a fishing pond here, or which was the original belief, or what they were originally saying, was that she either accidentally on purpose or on purpose drove herself into this pond and drowned. And and now, as of 24 hours ago, it is now being treated as a criminal matter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the ranch is allegedly owned by Mitch and Elaine.
Okay.
Angela Chao is the reason why Elaine Chao has family in the shipping business. She was the CEO of Foremost Shipping, this shipping company. And she was, and she's relatively young. She's younger than us. She's like 4 years younger than you and I. She's, and an attractive woman, well liked seemingly. They tried for 43 minutes to resuscitate her, and she was not coming back. But Elaine Chao's sister, Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law, was believed to, about 10 days ago or so, have driven on February 16th, the 15th, driven her car backwards into a pond and drowned. And there was a water emergency that the police and EMTs were called to the property, extracted the car, pulled the woman out. She was presumed dead, but they worked on her for a while, and she eventually passed away, or was, recognized as already having been dead. That she was not. They were getting no answers from this woman about how she ended up in this pond. But initially, the idea was, and the family seemed to be hiding it, that she may have done herself in. Really strange, really sad, all this stuff. Okay. Now, like I said, in the last 48 hours, it is being treated as a criminal matter, and that there is foul play suspected, I suppose. Otherwise, you wouldn't treat it as a criminal matter. Oddly enough, yes, I believe she was in a Tesla that drove backwards into the lake, and that's where I think they might have gone with it was an accident. The car just kind of did an auto drive and went out there, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, really hinky just in general, that part of it, right? Just that, that's a little wonky. The head of this shipping company that famously the cocaine back in the couple of years ago, and it's Elaine Chao's, and there's all these new sanctions against China that have just started. It's just hinky. Well, Elaine Chao is married to a guy named Jim Breyer. And Jim Breyer not only has got this big venture capitalist firm that works in China, but he also works with another venture capitalist firm that
you might have heard of them. They own the Briar Patch.
They do. Yes, where the ice cream comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So terrible. So they, I think I want to look at the data just to make sure. Yeah, January 31st. January 31st, Jim Breyer's venture capital firm, Angela Chao's husband, his venture capital firm was added to a list of companies that were doing business with the Chinese military, that the Biden administration put sanctions on, that they have this ongoing sanctions list of companies that are either helping the Chinese military in terms of technological investment, or in this particular case, helping these venture capital firms would apparently seed money into technology companies that would go, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money, and part of the deal that you'll get with us is not just the cash we give you, but we're going to help you manufacture whatever you're working on. Your computer boards, your anything you need technologically. We've got factories in China that kind of will double the impact of our venture capital investment in you. And the Chinese government was using this as a way of stealing intellectual property from American and Western companies through these venture capital firms that were linked with the military, going, hey, we like those guys. Get them to build their stuff over here in one of our factories. And then at night we'll just run off with their stuff, or we'll steal their schematics, or we'll take all their we'll go root through their hard drives and find out how their technology works and reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
And so he got added to that list January 31st of this year. Jim Breyer did. About 14 days later, his wife is dead.
Oh, boy.
Who is the head of this shipping company that is linked to the Chinese military as well, and has had this thing with because if there are drugs, there's guns, there's terrorism, there's, nefarious stuff. If you're shipping guns around, I think one thing that I think we've all learned from Iran-Contra, for example, was that seldom is there one criminal enterprise going on at a time. And that in and of itself makes it more hinky. There's also another weird turn in this sort of venture capital story. Not just with Jim Breyer and all this stuff. I'll tell you guys that after the break. In looking at it, there was one little detail that stood out to me that I was like, that's really odd. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide / true crime podcast. With 100% more Johnny Million. We'll be back right after this.
Quick bio break, Hal.
A bio break? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you call it now?
Open. No hand washing.
All right. Yeah.
Whatever happened.
Hey, whatever. You know, all right, you do what
you
you
do.
Hands?
No.
You do what you do. Do what you do. When you did what you did to me. Okay? Just try to. All right. Do what you have to do. Leave me out of it. I'm going to switch the camera to just me. Hi, everybody. Real quick, I need to open up my screen so that I can see the jets, the jet room. There we go. Thank you. Logging in and the thing. Cars. Okay, hashtag it. There we go. And then I don't see any more. I kind of see cars in that one. That's not a car, that's a minivan. Cars are minivans. I'm capturing right now. Okay. Hi, chat room. There it is. Now it's finally opening. One story called her a niece, but I guess it's the lady. Yeah. It's her sister. Insofar as I've been able to see. It's her sister, chat room. I look tired. Yeah, well, I traveled in late last night and I got up early this morning. I'll be fine. Plus, thank you. Plus, the lighting is fairly horrible. D-Wichita, we'll see you there. Yay! Johnny's much louder than me. Okay, all right. I'll see if I can fix that. I think I should have. I think it did. So, and they don't recognize the obvious sound of a 10-pound hammer. Yeah, flooding sunlight, that's the nature of. There's Johnny back. There we go. All right. There's Johnny back. Johnny, come back. Any kind of fool could see.
Remember the name of that band? I look it up almost every time, but now I remember.
No.
10 seconds, guys.
They're called Player, and their video is. They are so 70s.
It's not. You say it like it's.
Shiny, their hair's featherly, the facial hair is questionable.
Welcome back to the House Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Johnny giving us a piece of trivia during the break that the song "Baby Come Back, Any Kind of Fool Could See" was from a band called Player.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Don't hate the player. Hate the song. No, it's actually, I'm kidding. I do. I love that song too. I would consider that a comfort song.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? There's certain songs where they come on and you're like, oh, all right. Yeah. That's good stuff. So back to the mystery at hand. Okay. So amongst all this stuff in like January, there's this story that Jim Breyer, who's got this Breyer investment thing, and he works with IGC Capital. I'm going to get that wrong. Is he's one of the heads of this, which is a company that is in Beijing. It's a Beijing venture capital company that partnered with venture capital companies in the United States and in the West and in other places to bring money over there and start these business ventures. Now, obviously, I've been documenting for quite some time just how awful the Chinese economy is right now. There is a ton of unrest happening in places. The story about China is the news that isn't coming out, I would argue, right now. We'll get into that over the next week on my show because it's amazing. Like, it is, even by the standard of me trying to bring everybody on board with how, like, most of the economic news out of China for the past 8 years especially has been a farce. Mm-hmm. It's gotten exponentially worse in the last 6 months, which is why this draws my attention. Again, we're talking about Angela Chao, the sister of Elaine Chao, who perished on a ranch purportedly owned by Mitch and Elaine Chao here in Texas on February 15th. about 2 weeks ago, about a week ago, about 10 days ago-ish, 2 weeks ago, sorry, and then 2 weeks after her husband and his venture capital firm were added to a list of companies that were going to be sanctioned because they were aiding the Chinese military. Now, one of the things that I looked at, like in kind of looking into this story, because I hadn't heard much about it, so I had to do a lot of digging. I mean, have you heard anything about this, Johnny, at all?
This is the first I've heard of it.
Right. One would think that it would at least warrant a blurb. I mean, even if it's an accident, even if she had, sadly done herself in, it would be a newsworthy piece of information that the minority leader in the Senate and his wife, who was the former transportation secretary under Donald Trump, that they had a relative pass away under curious circumstances at their ranch, right? And Robin dropped in our chat saying they just heard this last night. It's just hit the criminal. It's just officially become a criminal investigation in the last 48 hours. So that you might start hearing about it, other places besides here. One of the odd parts about this, though, is that if you look at what Breyer, or what her husband has been saying, Breyer has been saying about Chinese investment over the last little bit, it is par for the course in the sort of hooey that I have been pushing back against. In one way, he's saying, yeah, the future's not going to be 8, 10, 12% return on your investment in China, but it's still going to be great. And it's, for the record, it's not. It is not. Anybody who's talking about investing in China for the future at all, if they're saying anything's going to be even remotely good, it's government military contracts. That is the only guaranteed return on somebody investing in that country right now, period. Because everything else is falling apart.
Yeah.
When it comes to this stuff, though, there was an odd little side note. So, Elaine Chao's sister, Angela Chao, who passed away, having been married to this guy who was tied to, funding that went to the Chinese military, as it works out, and ended up on a sanctions list about a month ago. She was married once before. She was married to a guy named Bruce Wasserstein. And Bruce Wasserstein was also a venture capitalist. His whole thing was, and he was famous in the, or made famous rather, in Barbarians at the Gate, like a character based on him, or that he's, he was in many ways thought to be like the father of the hostile takeover. He's one of the people who, were the driving force between this idea of like taking over companies, buying them up and selling them for parts. That idea.
Yeah.
Think of him as sort of a, like, if you saw Richard Gere and in Pretty Woman, imagine him played by Harvey Weinstein. That's what he looked like.
Yeah,
he looked like that. Okay, that's who this dude is. He did that job and he looked like that. He was married to Angela Chao as well. He married her. And he died the year they got married. He died that right away. I think it was in 8 months. They got married and he was dead. And oddly enough, I couldn't find what killed him. He just died. He went into the hospital for an irregular heartbeat and never came out.
Mm-hmm.
Cause of death not determined. This was at the time. This is 2009. Company spokeswoman said, though he had been hospitalized earlier this week for what was described as an irregular heartbeat. Well, then he clearly had a heart attack, or cardiovascular disease would be the thing, or something like that. I guess they never spoke of it again. But she married him. He died. And then she went on to marry this guy who would invest in Chinese military contracts and technology over the next decade. And culminating in Elaine Chao being transportation secretary for the for the Trump White House. And of course, she's married to Mitch McConnell. The amount of access is off the charts. Yeah. That access, thanks to Joe Biden, is drying up quick. And that seems to be, I don't see how that's not related in this situation. I find this whole thing, and we're going to have to keep an eye on this over the next couple of weeks as they determine what her actual cause of death was. I have not heard any, I haven't seen any of the comments from Breyer himself, and it's sad no matter what for him and their family and whatnot. That's the thing that always sticks with me, is that this poor woman is gone, and there are those who loved her and what have you. But I will say that after years of, and you guys know what a sinophiliac I am and a lover of Chinese culture, that my experience when I was in China of the sort of the Iron Gate coming down over the last 6 years got so obvious. They were pretty subtle for a long time. And you could see in how American companies treated, the Chinese market, the NBA, Hollywood, and all this stuff is this kind of future. Yeah, we're going to do business. We're going to do co-productions together. All this kind of stuff was the talk of sort of the international relationship between us and China. And then that hit a wall. And since then, stuff like this has been happening. Is it related? We can't tell. There's no way of knowing in this regard. Does it draw attention to the fact that she died under mysterious circumstances? Nobody seems to be talking so far about what happened to her, and her husband was just added to a sanctions list of venture capitalists that were aiding the Chinese military. Again, we'll keep an eye on it, but it stands out, and the fact that it's not a scandal is a scandal in and of itself. We got to take a break. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Yeah. At one point I'm reading up on this story and I'm like, oh, it's sad. Angela Chao died, and why? What? Why? She was where? And then at one point there was just one little sentence in there that said she was married once before to another venture capitalist. And I was like, oh, all right, maybe that's just the world she's in, right? I'm sure.
60 seconds, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get married in if you work in an accounting firm, maybe two of your partners are accountants. That's not surprising, right? That's who you hang around. Okay. Venture capitalists are famously, not like a group of people that work together. They don't play polo together in that regard. They're usually competing with each other. Yeah. I just I find that completely wonky. Yeah.
It's weird.
10 seconds.
You're locked into the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So, in the last 24 hours, also, the U.S. has started under orders from Joe Biden to make airdrops of aid into Gaza, much to the chagrin of the Netanyahu administration in Israel. But they conducted their first airdrop of humanitarian aid Saturday afternoon local time, which would be last night, what have you. Our time. U.S. official told Axios he expect more airdrops in the coming days. They gave a wide-scale delivery of aid to Gaza, and that the U.S. official that they were quoted saying there needs to be a ceasefire, which could be accomplished with a deal to release hostages. Now, that seems to be the big sticking point. One of the things that would stop the ceasefire, the theory is they could stop a ceasefire simply by returning the hostages. Give us our hostages back, and then we'll start, negotiating with you as people. But as long as you're holding our citizens and doing God knows what with them, and including a 10-month-old baby was one of the still is one of the hostages that's still missing. That returning the again the women and children to start, and because of the patriarchy, women and children are released first, and then men are kept to as to be used as coasters. That returning those folks, the idea is that this is the stalemate that we seem to be in, is that the Israelis and everyone else are saying return the hostages, and that will do a lot towards stemming the need for further attacks or assaults or going in incursions. And Hamas seems to be saying, well, if we are not holding these people, you would just bomb the areas where our military guys are. So if we're not going to use our own people as human shields because you've told them all to leave, we'll use your hostages as human shields. So you can't bomb the main buildings because that's more than likely where we're holding them. You can, and there's a very strong chance that some of the hostages have died in the fighting and the and in the bombings that have happened around the tunnel system and the like, because there's no safe way to clear them out. They know that there's Hamas fighters and leadership in these tunnels, and so rather than send in 10 soldiers to die, they just blow the place up. And unfortunately, they're, keeping these hostages near them as a way of dissuading the Israelis from that technique. So that the Hamas does not seem to be planning at any time in the near future to allow this, to give over the hostages, specifically because they need them. They are using them as cover. And that seems to be the stalemate. That seems to be the position of stalemate. But in the meantime, the Biden administration has ordered, officially humanitarian aid drops into Gaza. 38,000 meals were dropped, like ready-to-eat meals. They used a U.S. C-130. They dropped the meals along the coastline of Gaza, allowing for civilians access to critical aid. Now, this is after there was a stampede at one of the AIDS trucks, and about 93 people were killed, some of whom were trampled by the other people that were there. Others were shot as they attacked the Israeli soldiers who were guarding the entry point where the truck came through. And there's a mix of Hamas fighters versus civilians, and the concern seems to be internationally is that Gaza has a chance of turning into Mogadishu, where armed gangs are controlling the aid and therefore factioning human beings and kind of making them declare loyalty to one faction or the other, so that when Hamas is wiped out, and you can tell that Hamas is on its last legs, and is probably not recoverable, specifically because of how Egypt is acting. For those that don't know, Egypt has had this kind of quiet, tacit, under the table agreement with Hamas for a very long time, where Hamas is saying, okay, we won't mess with your secular government and have the Muslim Brotherhood attack you on the regular if you don't join Israel in changing anything, and you keep the border shut. Because we don't want Palestinians to have the ability, if they wanted to leave and move around to the West Bank or go someplace else. We want you to make sure they can't exit that way, because we need the buildup of people, over time, because we're using them for our political purposes. That was the argument. That was the agreement effectively between Hamas and the Egyptian government for a while. That again has failed, and Egypt is allowing both the border to be more porous and is not supporting they're leaning more towards supporting the Israeli position than they are towards this, which shows that they're not afraid of Yahweh Sinwar and in his contacts in the Muslim Brotherhood of attacking Egypt or Egyptians in general. There's no expectation that that's going to happen at this point because of that, because it's just not the structure left over. There's also, by the way, Islamic Jihad and all these other groups in there. They're the sort of ongoing concern, and the aid, the jockeying for and the seizing of aid within that area. the concern is that they'll start corralling who has the aid, and then Islamic Jihad will say, well, if you want to get food, you have to align with us, and or give us your son, or that kind of stuff, which is the tactics used by ISIS and Boko Haram in Africa and the like. It is a very similar strategy. Anytime you have refugees and aid, there's this secondary industry underneath that, and the concern is that's what's happening in the southern part of Gaza right now. And again, that's there were in the like Kosovo, like in the Kosovo situation, there was a similar circumstance where factions were controlling that stuff, and that's always going to be an issue. That's yeah. Jesus was a Palestinian Israel, disappeared in 780 BC. That's because the Romans renamed it. Somebody in the chat room is saying that. By the way, rehashing the history of places based on stuff that is over 400 years old and stuff is a little silly. And again, I think our biggest problem in this entire exchange is magic rocks. Is that anybody thinks rocks are magic? That you have to be near the magic rock or around the magic rock or the temple with the rock or any of that stuff. Either the whole world is precious or it isn't. And the idea that there are some places that are more important than others is you can think of it as imagine a resource war like oil, natural gas, farmland, something like that, but in a religious sense. It's the same thing. Think of the Temple Mount and all that stuff as the fertile soil or the oil fields of the religion. Right, that whoever has access and control of it, and it is partly the ongoing fight between Saudi Arabia and Iran over Mecca and Medina, and the latest turn in that is the argument that Mecca and Medina aren't the religious spots at all, and that there are Iranian messaging groups that are pushing for this idea that originally it was the Temple on the Mount they were pointing to. That people they're praying in the wrong direction, and they're supposed to be praying towards the Temple Mount, which is in Jerusalem. And if that's more reason for the Palestinians to take over that area and have it be an Iran proxy state to counter the religious pilgrimages going to Mecca and Medina. Like that's part of this fight. That in and of itself is the unsolvable part.
Yeah.
No amount of aid or weaponry will change that group's mind. And the only thing that funds it is our and the rest of the world's attachment to oil. And as we move away from this,
it all seems to boil down to.
Yep. As we move away from that to renewables, nuclear, wind, tidal power, all those kind of things, and battery operated vehicles, as you start to tip the sort of power and control scheme of oil in the world, you are going to see this place be volatile first, because everybody's going to be jockeying for the last bits of that control point, and then gone entirely. And there were wars over horses. I mean, go watch any Western about, and almost everybody who you'll see in those things get hung, in the first 10 minutes of a Western series or a movie was because they were stealing horses. Right? That was it. Who controlled the horses? Controlled, everything, the economic structure of the area. The native tribes that got, horses from the Spanish initially wiped out all the tribes that didn't have horses. If the Comanche and other tribes in the United States, they formed partnerships or stole through raiding parties horses from the Spanish as they brought them over, and that spread throughout the plains. The ones who had control of the horses, those are the ones who wiped out the other tribes. There was transportation being sort of the pivotal point in this, and this is no different. And by the way, for the last little bits of that, before trains and automobiles and all that stuff came, the transition was relatively swift. And it was ugly near the end. And this is going to be no different. Right? You can kind of expect this because people don't make these kind of transitions quickly. And so when they do happen quickly out of your hands, that's when panic happens. That's when when there's violence around it, right? Because the last people hanging on to that are going to need, it's going to be a dwindling source in that regard. Thanks, KJ Dog Glove. Found 3 fake Hal Sparks Facebook profiles pages, reported all of them. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I only have one.
Wow.
I have one business page and one personal. Right. So I find it interesting that these stories seem to be together this morning, and it's sort of an accident, but it's around transportation. Both the Angela Chao story and her family's wealth around these giant tankers that both bring oil and I guess liquefied natural gas, I suppose, why not? But certainly coal, and I have no doubt they ship retail goods and the like. But in that the value, the power, the money that's involved in that transport, especially as supply chains got broader and farther apart, was enormous. It was a tremendous amount of money. Now, I mean, what COVID did more than anything else was snapshot the idea that we would have a global supply chain, and the just-in-time manufacturing idea that involved shipping across the entire oceans in 6 days, we get this made immediately. 6 days from now, it'll be here because that's how long it takes the ship to get where it's going down south, and then they'll drive the rest of the way in a truck.
Yep.
As we bring stuff closer to home through automation and molding manufacturing and other stuff in the United States, which is becoming increasingly easy to do, there's going to be 2 elements of inflation that are going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And until that shift happens, till that shift is complete, and it is going to happen. It is just understand that most of the manufacturing that was done in China by the U.S. and Canada and our other partners over here is going to be done either here or in Mexico, and that's on its way. And that process is going to cost us in 2 ways. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. That's one of the things about the Ukraine war that I don't think people grasp, because we think of everything as being so technologically advanced, or we have this kind of I think in war people kind of imagine this laser beams and Terminator type stuff. It's weird. You know what I mean? In your head, when you picture warfare, and it's still, this tank has to get from here to there. What's it run on? How do you get that into the tank? How do you fill it up if it burns out all of its fuel getting there, how does it get back? Who's the guy who has to bring the tank of gas, right? And I don't know that people think about that in these terms. Just in the kind of, if you think deeply about it, you do. If you start contemplating it, you start obviously. But in the surface level that most people kind of think about the Ukraine war or what's going on in Israel, Gaza, and all those kind of things, there's this kind of I wouldn't call it a 10,000 foot view, but it's like a 3,000 foot view where you really just kind of defocus your eyes and don't really get the complexity of what you're looking at, right? It just looks, yeah. Thank you, Slayer Chick. On a
Slayer
streak.
Chick.
Fantastic. All right, is the multi-stream working? Yes, it is. Does it work? No. All right. Luckily, I have this guy. Let's see. Yeah, suicide mission for jet fuel. Yep. Thank you, Seahawk, for the super chat. So that one, I'm scrolling back through.
Yeah.
This like I have to say, like that Elaine Chao thing gets more hinky.
Back in 20.
The Angela Chao rather. Thank you. The Angela Chao story gets more and more hinky the more I read it. Like it has all the makings of just like a true crime podcast where you're like, what the what, and then who, and then and the interesting thing is we get fixated on like the Murdoch crime. The dad who killed his wife and son.
Welcome back to the House Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back. So I think I made a fairly decent case for why we need to get off oil in a measured way. You're not going to do it in a hurry because we can do it in the first world. We can do it in a relative hurry, over the course of an 8-10 year period. We can. That's quick. Worldwide changes in how you fuel your transportation. That's amazingly quick historically, especially as deeply entrenched as oil and gas are in our way of life. And I mean the ability, the fact that we are transitioning out of it as fast as we are is really impressive. Really impressive. But the rest of the world can't do it that fast. Certainly not Africa in its current state, Central Africa specifically, and parts of South America, where getting food and resources deep into areas where there are no naturally occurring resources, but there are lots of people now because that's the world petroleum built. The only reason population started to explode in some of these areas was because fuel was viable, cheap, and relatively easy to procure. And one of the things that people miss on, say, when OPEC, in an attempt to push back against like American and UK petroleum growth during Jimmy Carter's term, where they played footsie with Ronald Reagan and all that kind of stuff. During that time, one of the things that happened is, we had people in gas lines and people fighting. Remember, there were stories in the news about people getting into fist fights in gas lines in America, and they stretched down the block.
Yeah.
Those stories swamped
the
number of people who were starving to death. No one seemed to make the connection that when OPEC or Russia together, OPEC plus, when they lower output on purpose, while it drives up prices in the United States and gets everybody kind of on the news going, who's this good for or bad for politically, in our country, in a lot of other countries, there's just stacks of dead bodies. That food truck is no longer fueled to get that food to those people, and the people who would drive the food truck are barely getting food themselves because the little tuk-tuk they have or the motorcycle they're using to get resources for them and their family might run out of gas too. And so that choking off of supply, again, while it politically manipulates the United States perhaps, devastates other regions of the world. And one of the other, it's one of the kind of bones I have to pick with the idiots that are throwing, paint on great works of art and that kind of, are attempting to. Obviously, most of them are behind glass to protect against morons like this, but that are going, end petroleum now. Don't understand that unless you measure it out and you land the plane. If you don't land the plane properly, you will crash the plane. And if you end petroleum today, you sign the UK, United States, Canada, and everybody in the Paris Accord signs a piece of paper. From today forward, all the gas is shut down. No more petroleum, period, end of story. The second you do that, you trigger a series of events that will kill about 1 billion people over the next year or so. About 18 months, you'll kill 1 billion people. And that's just a reality. There's no way around that. And you can tell because anytime the price of it has gone up or production goes down, or which demand would crash production and a bunch of loss of demand on that level would crash production. There wouldn't be the money in it to sell it to the first world nations. They have no impetus to sell it below cost to Central Africa or other places, so they just shut it off. They'd go to something else. They'd switch over immediately, or they sell off the last little bits of it, but that's it. Yeah, like you wouldn't. There's no ambulances in Central Africa running anymore. There's no food trucks in South America running anymore. There's nothing. And the ships that would grind to a halt on top of that, because there's no way to make it profitable. There's no way to make it worth the trip, the expenditure of the actual, because again, there's an immediate drop in the cost of fuel and then a spike because nobody's making it anymore. It becomes a boutique fuel because nobody's using it. Transportation isn't, for whatever it's worth, you cannot beat physics, ladies and gentlemen. And
it's kind of the bottom line.
Yep, you will always, and this is why The Fly is a dumb movie. We'll get into that later. But I love The Fly, but it's a dumb movie.
I believe you're saying that.
Oh yeah. I love all things Gina Davis and all things Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah. But for the record, the reason it's a dumb movie is because he spends all of his time trying to transport things. But he can't transport living things, and it's upsetting to him, and he doesn't want to release this technology until he does. Not realizing that simply being able to teleport non-physical items would change transportation and the environment in an instant. Yeah. Forever. Like, no more shipping costs at all. Think of all the things that require weight going across roads that you could just teleport via electrical lines. It's absurd.
I could just teleport to the bathroom at 1 a.m.
Well, I think that what you'll get is it's maybe there's a little adapter you could put on yourself. It's like a bowel adapter everyone would have that once a day, just 3 times a day, teleports what's inside you out, because it doesn't have to survive the trip.
True. Oh boy, bowel adapter is another song title.
I agree. But the point I'm trying to make is that's why it's dumb. The movie's over at that point. If he had just done that, he would have made trillions of dollars within weeks, and could have spent the rest of his life figuring out how to transport humans safely. Just saying. Yeah. But that would have been a romantic comedy if I'd have written it. He never would have turned into a fly. He would have been a brilliant inventor who finds a quirky reporter who falls in love with him, no matter how stammery and odd he is, and is But point being is that transportation is and the cost of transportation is one of the reasons why we had inflation, because of supply shock, and that is going to continue for the foreseeable future as things. We don't need stuff that's as far away. So for a ship to be worth its while to transport stuff, if it's transporting less, you have these giant container ships that just look like impossible to fill. They look like cruise ships for containers, right? They look 4 stories high. It's nuts. Yeah. If a lot of those ships, if they were half full, it wouldn't be worth the cost of the trip for the people on the ship. It's worth it for the people whose goods are being shipped, but it's not worth it for them. So the price automatically goes up, right? To measure that out. Sure. My job isn't just to get your stuff from here to there. My job is to get your stuff from here to there and feed my crew, right? And pay my crew a wage and perhaps benefits. What a crazy notion, right? So kind of crucial. And I'm sorry you're not feeling well today, Lisa, but thank you for the super chat. Just lurk and relax. It's okay. We'll let the
lurk
words
and relax.
Yeah. So for the in those situations, you've got other people. The crews have to eat. Now I know a lot of the people who are pro Houthi don't seem to care about that right now. It's a very weird thing, and notice how that's dropped off since the U.S. and U.K. hit the Houthi missile sites. The number of attacks have dropped off precipitously, and yet there weren't a lot of Yemeni deaths at all. We'll get into that at another point. I'll be talking about on Friday this week. I will be talking a lot about the AI targeting systems that they're using to try and minimize civilian deaths, and so far so good. But you know, the transportation costs are one of the reasons why we've had what would be a persistent part of inflation that's not going to come down. It has nothing to do with money supply, everything to do with what it costs to get fewer goods from one place to another, those that are crucial. You know, used to be able to piggyback really important gear on top of stupid consumer goods, plastic garbage, and that would wait out the worth of the ship being transported. Now the fewer consumer goods, ask Temu, and why they go into debt $3 billion, because it is the Chinese government subsidizing the shipping industry so it doesn't collapse. So everybody goes, why would I get it from there? Why don't I get it from Mexico? Why don't I get it from Canada? Why don't I get it from the UK, where we have a better relationship?
I pronounced it Temu.
Huh?
I pronounced it Temu, not Temu.
I always call it Temu, but But it's not. Ultimately, it's not important. It's meant to sound Japanese, so people trust it more. It's a very weird business model.
Oh yeah.
We gotta take a break. We come back
in the chat. Steve in the chat said Temu sells landfill.
Yeah, it is. It is a landfill.
He's going right to the
and
landfill.
the other thing that's going to keep prices up for a while is the elimination of slave labor. Uyghurs picking cotton and working in electronics factories. You can either have that slavery and the cheaper prices, or you can pay slightly more. We'll be back right after this. Okay.
I heard that Phil is on his way.
I see him. There he is. Can you hear us, Phil?
And if you got questions for Phil, I'm more than happy to convey them, but don't just like put a fact in.
I do not hear you,
for Phil. Here's a fact.
So, you know, we don't hear.
Try to make it a question.
Hold on. Let's see.
Can you hear me, Hal?
Yeah.
Can you milk me?
What? I hear you. Yeah.
I have nipples, Hal.
Huh? What?
How about
there? You go.
Now?
Now we hear you. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. Yep. All good.
Excellent.
Oh, you're a little quiet. And we can almost see some chest hair. What's the weather like over there, Phil?
Getting warmer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can do anything to boost my levels.
You're fine.
Okay.
Totally fine.
Aw, don't zip up. Come on, dude. I was almost done.
God. He's got enough trouble. Like,
the disappointed head shake is what I live for, Phil. You must know that by now.
We can always count on Johnny for accidental levity.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, there's a good question in the chat. When you have a beard, do you have to speak louder?
It works like a muffle.
Yeah, it's like a silencer for your face. Like, do things echo as soon as you shave your beard? It's just like, whoa! I don't think Phil's going to talk to me for the rest of the show.
I don't think so. I think he's
trying to frame myself up here.
You're fine.
Gone and done it.
Yeah.
You're kind of backlit there, Hal.
Yeah, I'm at a hotel, but it's
you got a backlighting issue.
It was too dark.
It's a pain in the...
It was too dark and too beige for me. Like I'm literally like this. This thing makes me like the same color as the curtains and everything. It's terrible.
I bought, and I'm sure you can find it as well over there. I bought a little ring light that it splits in half.
Yes,
and it collapses to about like that size. It's about the size of a adopt kit or something.
Nice.
Yeah. That's something maybe worth. I don't know how light or heavy do you travel when you travel?
I have a backpack that's dedicated to gear. The only issue this time was I'm testing out a situation where audio video is more important than the kind of making it look better. So I make sure I have everything with me and I'm running stuff on it. I have two laptops with me right now. I'm running the show on a laptop, and then I am outsourcing some of the other stuff. The checking the stream and all that stuff is on a second laptop. It's on an older laptop, and that seems to be doing some of the heavy lifting and taking the weight off of this computer. So it's been pretty smooth. I think so. Right, chat? Everybody? Yeah. I think it looks all right.
Yeah, it's a huge improvement over last week.
Right.
Because, you were at your LA house where Bumper has done something.
God. Yeah. Yeah. We're jockeying between, it's either him or Chip that does the most damage to my live streams.
Basically both like chewing on cables.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I give Bumper crap, but I really enjoy him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My limited exchanges with him, he was very nice.
Mm-hmm. Don't get him on when he's been watching Fox though.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, really?
Oh yeah.
What? Really?
Oh yeah, really.
God damn it.
Mm-hmm. It's how it is. It's the strangest thing.
I don't get it. Oh, thank you, Tom Ward.
What happened? Sorry.
Tom Ward super chatted for the 5th time on a live stream.
Radio program, mega worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not always being so charming.
Video streaming at houseparks.com.
I don't care for you if the putrid sludge you're prowling out.
Puss-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Well, welcome back to the show, and welcome Philip Bittner, who's live in Ukraine, joining us. Johnny Million still with us. He's going to be farming questions from the chat room for Phil this time. And thanks, Tom Ward, for that. He says, thanks for reading the Hunter Biden deposition. Yeah, so for those that don't know, on Friday, I read the entire Hunter Biden deposition as like a radio play. All of it. The only thing I left out really was the rules of the thing at the beginning and the swearing in. But from that point forward, I read everything else. And it was pretty fascinating, and it was very disappointing for them, and they're getting angrier and at their lameness as it goes on. And its value as a distraction away from things like Ukraine funding and the like is fading as well. People are starting, because you start stacking the L's in this situation, and it doesn't look good. It's not.
And Swalwell took him to task.
Oh, super good. Swalwell's, it's fantastic.
I thought was fun.
Yes, it was. Now, there's a lot of stuff that happened. There was a drone strike in Odessa that killed civilians. Yep. There was the Ukrainians continue to shoot down Su-35s at an amazing clip. It's weird. It's almost as if the Russians went, okay, well, because the U.S. is lagging, we'll start. Maybe they're out of Patriots or something. Maybe they're out of anti-aircraft stuff, and they keep finding out. Nope, they're not. Nope, they're not. They're not out. And I think it's like I think we're at 18 now, something like that. It's crazy over the last couple of weeks.
And they knocked out at least 2 of these Antonov 50, the equivalent of our AWACS, which might be the reason why we're seeing all the other fighter jets get knocked out of the sky,
right.
Because
they don't know what's coming.
Once you take out their early warning system in the form of these Antonovs, they can't mount a decent defense. Mm-hmm. And their coordination of their air force is less coordinated. Their planning and whatnot, their synchronization, and that might be having a large part to do with it. And then there is a lot of talk about there being a new system, and it might be a new variant on the Patriot. We're not exactly 100% sure what's causing all the knockdowns, but it's definitely in conjunction with the Antonov 50s. That we do know.
Yes.
Because they've moved them all away from the area where they're getting knocked out of the sky. Mm-hmm. So the Russians have shown by their deployment of their air assets that the Antonov 50 knockdowns have meant a lot to them, but they continue to knock down these fighter bombers in the form of Su-35s and 27s, mm-hmm. or sorry, Su-34s and 27s. So it's all obviously something is happening in the air war. We're not 100% sure what it is.
Yeah, one of the curious part is that from a tactical standpoint, it looked as if because the Russians are using what are called glide bombs frequently, which shows I mean, they're cheap and they're very devastating. They're a little more quote unquote dumb than because they're not. If anybody saw the most recent Maverick, the Top Gun movie, one of the things that they do is they fly directly towards a site, and the airplane itself is the aiming mechanism of the bomb that's going to hit. So it uses the force of the airplane going forward, and then when they drop it, gravity pulls it a little bit, and you can measure where it's going to land. That's different from a glide bomb, which is you just release it, and then it kind of drifts with the wind in a general direction over a period of time, and it's not nearly as precise. Very different from, by the way, the Israelis in Gaza are using the same technique. You see the directional bombing, where they're flying the planes downward at the target, and then they release them. These glide bombs can hit whatever. The problem is that you have to. They fly a little slower when they release them, and it may be one of the reasons, because the Russians are nervous about their planes being hit, that they're getting more planes hit because they're releasing these glide bombs. It's like this back and forth. That's the cost of doing it. The cost of doing it that way. At the same time, though, it's incredibly devastating, and they don't care. It's not like they're missing a target. They don't care what the targets are. They just want to hit anything they can. So they're just peppering it. It's that artillery aspect, that World War II, World War I Russian artillery attitude. So yeah. Sorry, Thursday.
And then the strike, and then the strike in Odessa has been devastating. And if you'll allow me, I mean, there are 7 dead people at the time we're broadcasting. 7 dead people, including a 10-year-old child, by all reports, and a 3-month-old child whose body was found underneath her mother, who was trying to protect her infant child from the collapsing rubble. Those 7 people's lives are snatched away from this earth, in no small part due to the GOP and Speaker Johnson, who I consider their blood upon their hands, in no small part. That's a 3-month-old child who will never grow up, who will never find love, who will never live a life, who will never potentially become a doctor and find a cure for cancer, or write a poem that moves another human being. That is a child's life who has been snuffed out because Speaker Johnson wants to play domestic politics with Ukrainian lives. And we should all be deeply, deeply upset at the way the GOP has handled the Ukrainian aid deal. It was a drone strike against an apartment building. And one of the things that we do really well is knock drones out of the sky. This could have been avoided. That 3-month-old infant would be alive now if Speaker Johnson had let that aid package go to the floor. Shame on him. Shame on the GOP. And we need to correct this, because we made promises to these people, not only all the way back in 1994, where we said we would protect them if they gave up their nukes, and we are being negligent in that. But in this current full-scale war, we said we would be here for the Ukrainian people, and we're not. And there are 7 people who are dead right now in Odessa because Speaker Johnson has failed in his job. Shame on you. Shame on you, Johnson.
Yeah. And I've been calling him, we called him Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week. I called him after the show on Friday because I had to leave early. But I posted, and I'm going to do it again this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, in the morning show. We will be calling him as part of the show. I post the number for Speaker Johnson. It's in the chat as well on the regular. I
call my representative on the daily, or I call him. We need to keep the pressure up.
Yeah.
And if you're anywhere near the Beltway, near the Beltway, there is a daily protest at the corner of New Jersey and Independence. Go join them. Go join them. Make your voice heard.
Will do. Also, my representatives are on board with Ukrainian aid, so they know, and it doesn't mean I don't call them to restate that. But I will say that there's more value for me, and I think a lot of people who are in an area where the person we voted for actually got in office. contacting the speaker's office is really helpful, because you've got to, checking that mark. That, again, they don't care what you say or how you say it. They're just checking the box for border bill, for Ukraine aid. All that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that your voice is heard, and they add that to the check. So that list. Now, one of the other stories, and I guess this is sort of this may bleed over into the next one, but there was this allegedly like a wiretap conversation between the Germans about striking the Kersch bridge with Taurus missiles.
Yep. Yeah, apparently an intercept, and we always have to be mindful of where the sourcing is from this. This is clearly a conversation between two, if I understand this correctly, two military officials in Germany, just kind of spitballing, as it were, just kind of war gaming, as it were, what it would take to knock down the bridge. And they were saying, look, this thing is so huge, it's going to take X amount of strikes against it to knock it down.
Right.
This is all in the backdrop of Scholz also being obstructionist and stopping the Taurus, which is a really powerful cruise missile, akin to the Shadow Strike, which is Britain's version. Britain's given their version. Then they're apparently behind the scenes are urging the Germans to send their equivalent, this Taurus system, but the Germans are being reluctant. It is interesting, however, that this intercepted call, which is clearly a Russian op, they clearly have tapped into this phone line. Yeah. And the discussion, it's interesting because the discussion is just, they're just saying, like, hypothetically, if we were to do this, what would it take? And not even we do it. So it is taken on this life of its own of, like, the Germans are going to strike the Kerch Bridge. No, what they're saying is, if we were to give the Taurus to the Ukrainians, what would it take? And we would, obviously, we'd have to give them targeting assistance. We would have to do this. We'd have to do that.
Yeah.
But I have listened, from what I have listened to the phone call, and again, I don't speak German, so I'm getting it through an interpretation, is that they are just basically saying, were we to give Tauruses to the Ukrainians? I don't think any German right now is talking about actually actively participating in combat operations in Ukraine. So
I think I do too. I think from what I saw, I think they were talking about, like, what, it's like what it would take to actually knock this thing down. What do we have? Because it would take one of our Taurus missiles to do this. If we were to do it, we'd have to hit it here, here, and here, and here. So what do they have that's similar, so we know what they're up to? Not quite we're planning on hitting it for them with our stuff. It wasn't anywhere close to that. And I think the problem is that the slapdash reading of it played into that, creating that illusion.
Well, and the propaganda machine has taken over. Once again, I just reiterate, we're under a psychological and information war, and we should be aware of it. This is part of it.
Agreed. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. I want to I'll interject a little bit of the Chinese ISOON leak, IS00N leak into this conversation as well, which is APT 41, which is the Chinese version of, like, the Fancy Bear Russian system, and APT 19, I think, was one of the ones. We'll talk about some of that on the other side, because that's an integral part of this this information warfare part that I want to bring up. We'll be back. Yeah, I'm trying to find this.
I'm just so pissed off at Johnson.
It's gross.
It's really sick. It's really sick. Get him out. Get him out. I see increasing calls.
Yeah.
For to vote for removal on the Democratic side.
Just put Trump
would
in
be
there.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch after this, I'm going to switch my brain off and play some stupid video games.
I think that's wise.
It's just too miserable today. I'm getting all these Ukrainians. I got a buddy of mine in California I play World of Warcraft with. I don't care about it, but it's a good way for us to stay in touch. Yeah, no, I've just seen too many Ukrainians today just going, and Odessites. Man, oh man, if there was, like all this talk of like, oh, the Russians keep talking about like, we're going to take Odessa back, and Odessa, we're going to reclaim Odessa. And it's like,
back in 20.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been there 3 times since the full-scale invasion. There's no way they're taking that city back. They've lost it forever. And this today only added to it.
You're locked into the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So, for those that don't know, there was a big intel leak. Everybody's calling it the Chinese Edward Snowden, whoever this person is, that worked for a company, possibly, they don't know who did it, but released all these documents from a company called iSoon. I mean, that's what people are calling it, but it's actually IS00N. That's a company that is a hacker group for hire that the CCP uses. And it's based on the same model that that the Russians use, both with their kind of specifically government-aligned groups and the ones they hire in North Korea, for example, that do all this stuff. And one of the things that stood out to me about this was there's a bunch of stuff in there about how they, manipulate algorithms and how you get it had a price list of an FBI agent, like getting their phone number, and a tap on their phone line was like, 20,000 US paid to this group. And if you wanted somebody inside the Oval Office, it was $150,000 to $200,000 US to do this. And part of the reason why this came out was, and again, this is totally related to the Chinese economy collapsing and how much government money there is to actually slather around in these things, that the people working in these groups who were promised, fairly cush jobs doing this stuff were starting to get mad because they weren't getting the money they were promised. And so they, whoever dumped this very well may have been one of those folks. Now, it also could have been somebody who was, poking them about, you deserve better. Why don't you come work for us? And then they extracted that person, and then that person, either through faking their death or something like that or whatever, so that their family wouldn't be harmed, is now working for the U.S. government of the UK or MI6 or whoever, and they dumped this stuff online as part of it. But it seems to be more internal. It seems to be that they're griping about the company. It seems like disgruntled hacker employees, and they're dumping. And the threat is they're going to dump even more of this stuff online. And one of the things they dumped was this program that they have that they sell, which is a Twitter social manipulation strategy. This program that can take over what are effectively like null accounts, people who set up a Twitter account a long time ago but don't really use it anymore, but it's still there. They never shut it down officially. Can just take over all those and start and use all them and dump a messaging scheme on. And they have this huge pathway by which they do this, and they didn't invent it by any stretch, but it's the first time I've ever seen it laid out by, and how it works, what you're paying for, what you get. And this is a company, again, aligned with the Chinese military, obviously aligned with the CCP, but done in sort of a mercenary arrangement, which is why it got out, because they have internal groups that do it as well, and they've started internalizing these groups. And this may be why it came up, is that they scooped up a bunch of these private things that they had done, like Russia does, and just incorporated them into the Chinese military. So they can just, if you paint outside the lines, they just shoot you because you're a direct traitor in this. Whereas in this particular instance, whoever didn't want to be scooped up apparently is mad that they're not getting paid anymore and are dumping this stuff online. But this is
it's interesting because it's not exactly how the Russians have it set up.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians have it set up so that it's or it has been in the past. I don't know post Prigozhin's death if they've been absorbed into the the actual military intelligence apparatus. But what they originally had originally done back in 2016, 2012, all the kind of high watermarks when Russia was interfering in particular in our elections, is they would have 1 degree of separation, so that if anybody actually got caught, they could just be like, "Oh, I don't know, some hacker in Russia.
Right.
We didn't have anything to do with it." You know, is it like that in China as well, or is it? It's my understanding they don't have that kind of structure.
No, well, that's the thing is you can't really tell because there's no such thing as private anything really over there, especially over the last 8 years. It's increasingly done that. But again, Russia's doing the same thing. If you could look at, it's almost like Russia's following the same mechanic.
Well, the technique is the same.
Yeah,
yeah,
but that they're they're taking Wagner Group used to be external. Now they're saying it's ours, and we admit that it was always part of the military, even if it was at arm's length before. The same thing is kind of going on in terms of these Chinese groups, but I think the specific thing was this categorical process by which they would artificially dump talking points, hashtags, civil unrest, verbal wars between people by playing up extremities and then setting fake accounts to and for against it to drive it up in the algorithm so that, in any large group of people, there's some dunderheads. And so you can always get the real dunderheads mixed in with the fake ones and nobody can tell the difference. And then you have all these alleged free speech defenders going, they're trying to stop.
Now that the owner of the single largest social network in the English-speaking world has decided to take complete hands off in regards to any kind of regulation of his platform, it's the Wild West. It's insane. So, they're gonna capitalize on it, and the closer we get to the election, closer we get to November, both Chinese and Russian, I'm sure, will just be running absolutely. That platform is, I find very little benefit from still remaining there. In terms of the information I get from it, I use it as a platform to put my stuff out. But as far as like gaining information from it, I see very little advantage there. It's useless. And that crazy South African with, who is just, the deeper you dig into his past, woo!
Which one?
He is a very disturbed individual. The Musk.
Of course.
Very disturbing past.
Johnny, do we have any questions before I go into the next?
Yeah, we sure do.
Yeah, okay, let's grab a couple of those. Start early because I will have a tendency to again filibuster if we're not careful.
Right on. So this first one's from Linda Blanton. Can you ask Phil about how many Russian planes they shot down in total this last month? Plus, as a side note, Deidre and Linda are going to see Hal tonight, so you'll have extra cheering support.
Sweet.
The latest number I think was, I'm trying to remember, it's well over 18. I don't know the exact number. I know there were the 2 Antonovs, and there's been I can bring it up here.
Yeah, I'll see if I can bring it up quickly as well.
Let's see here. We have how many? I don't know. It's up there though. Here we go. Let's see. So sorry here. How many exactly are we at? It's because it's changing so quickly. Yep. I think we got 2 today, actually.
Yeah,
11
might make it 20.
Su-34. 11 Su-34s have been struck down. The 2 A-50s. And then I know there are a bunch of 27s as well. I mean, they're knocking every day. They're knocking them down. There was some suspicion that it might actually be the F-16s that have arrived here, and the Ukrainians who are keeping that quiet. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a prolonged thing. This has been going on for the better part of 2 weeks now, if not even a little bit more. And if it was actually F-16 shooting their AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, by now the Russians would have recovered some debris and said, "Hey, F-16s are here, and we're angry about it."
Right.
Because that is in their benefit. There's been speculation there's a new targeting system when it comes to S-200s or 300s, or it could be another variant that the Patriot. But whatever it is knocking down. I mean, we're we're well into. I think it is 18. I want to say it's 18.
I'm fairly
But
fairly certain that's the number 2.
Yeah, it's like one or two a day. I saw 2 today. But again, going back to the beginning of our hour here, when we talked about the big thing, I think, aside from whatever munition is being used, whatever new tactic or munition or weapon system that the Ukrainians are using, whatever it is, it was hugely significant that the 2 Antonovs 50s were knocked out of the sky, because that in essence cuts off the head, blinds them in the air, and they can't coordinate their air forces. So that's why we see then, after the Antonovs, these 27s and 34s.
There was a huge milestone that I think aligns with, and I misspoke. It was Thursday when I did the read through of the Hunter Biden transcript. But there was, one of the things he talked about was the fact that he was there to represent like good governance on the board of Burisma, to make sure that when money came in, it went to where it was supposed to go. You don't necessarily, everybody on a board doesn't know how the mechanics of any company they're working on works, but they have a specific role, legal, other stuff. And he was specifically saying, we need to make sure that the funds and everything that was supposed to be spent was spent where it was supposed to. Well, there was I guess for the first time this winter, ever, as far as I know, Ukraine got through the winter on its own gas.
Yes.
Using its own gas reserves, it got through the winter just using that, instead of having to get any from Russia or anywhere else. I suppose Russia was the other source in it. That's a huge turning point. That, the same is true, by the way, of, insofar as I know, Germany. A couple other European countries that were using Russian, gas, they stopped using Russian gas. Now, they're not going to get it from themselves. They're getting it from Qatar and Norway and other places like that. But Ukraine just used the gas it had. For the first time ever, it is totally, and it's self-sufficient in that regard, in a way that Germany isn't. You and I have talked about this. Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll take more of the questions. But you and I have talked about how, if Ukraine is allowed to flourish, it could very well become the biggest European economy, member of the economy, bigger than Germany.
Or certainly up there.
Yep. Over time, because of its resource richness and its infrastructure in that regard, which is what the Russians have been trying to undermine forever. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Check out Philip Ittner. He's got a new podcast coming out. Go to his at Philip Ittner, 1L, 2 T's on YouTube, and we'll be back right after this. So I think keeping Ukraine on the leash was part of the thing they were trying to do with Germany. You could see the slow walk of German, Germany control. Even Trump was like, I told them that you'd be waving the white flag. I waved the white flag at them because that's what you're doing, whatever. Okay. That was him trying to divide NATO, but he was using a talking point told to him by a general. He just liked dunking on Angela Merkel. He didn't care.
Yeah.
He just wanted her to look stupid.
Yeah, and weak. If we can circle back around to Burisma as well on the air, is there's one thing we're talking about ad nauseum, and if we can get it on the air, that'd be great. Is that that period of time was crazy. That period of time from 2014 to basically 2022, it was. I liken it to Casablanca. I mean, there was a lot of dodgy stuff going on here. A lot of money being stolen. So just having the name Biden, all this talk of like, oh, he was showing his name for influence, pay for play.
Right.
No, man, he was somebody that could
trusted.
Be tracked.
Right.
He was a loan. He was a loan guarantor.
Mm-hmm.
All of you guys out there who got a loan and your parents co-signed on it. It's because your parents had a good
they knew your parents weren't going to piss off with the money. That's the point. Right.
I don't know why that's so hard to understand.
Me neither. So
well, it's not that it is. It's not that it's hard to understand. It's just that it's being manipulated.
Right.
The information flow is being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly.
Yeah. The current casualty number on the Russian side is 415,640. 960 since last night.
We're going to cross 500,000 probably by mid-March.
Oh, they're gonna
end of March.
They're gonna, if they have the people to throw at it. That's the other question, because there's been some breakthroughs, but because they're running low on ammunition in the in some of the areas, the Ukrainians are dealing with this. But I mean, if Russia gets,
okay, we're coming back in 10.
Thank you. If Russia gets its gander up and decides to do bigger meat waves like an Avdiivka across the entire area, you can see that number hit before summer. This is horrible.
Oh, easy.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We were just talking during the break that the number of Russian casualties is now, as of the most current number I have, 415,640, 960 extra dead since last night. And the Ukrainians have lost a lot of people as well, and they've lost civilians in this fight or whatever. But the number given by the Ukrainian ministry is close to 31,000 dead, probably double that in injuries. Usually that's how it works. And a lot of the people who are injured, if it's not a catastrophic or debilitating injury, are cleared up and sent back. So like a Purple Heart level injury would be, categorized in that. They would be rotated out and then rotated back in. 415,960 Russians dead, or
10-1,
or amputated limbs, debilitating, gone from the battlefield forever. It is,
which every single person that I have ever spoken to who has come off the line, in any battlefield, a 10 to 15 to 1 ratio is totally
normal.
Believable.
Right.
I have spoken to so many both foreign fighters who have come here and joined the Legion, or Ukrainians that have come off the line. Yeah, 10 to 15 to 1 is a completely believable number.
Yeah, I mean, I subscribe.
What their
I subscribe again to the Russian and the Ukrainian Telegram channels to see how both are talking about certain things, and you can really get a decent picture on how they're telling the story from both sides of a battle, both sides of an interaction. Ticks, troops in combat, in contact rather, and even the Russians are admitting that it's a 4-to-1 kill ratio, Ukraine to Russia. That when they're in battles, there was a story just this week of 4 Ukrainians who were separated from their unit, who had moved down the line, and and everybody else had gone another direction, encountering somewhere in the area of like 28 to 30 Russians, and there wasn't a single Russian survivor in that exchange. All the Ukrainians rejoined their unit. 28 to 30 dead Russians in that one situation, and just these 4 guys. And again, this is with them on a skeleton crew level of gear. Imagine if they could just and by the way, this would mean less Russians dying too. For all the people who, like the Marjorie Taylor Greens in the crowd, are like, all these Ukrainians are dying for the inevitable. I'm like, I got news for you. The Russians are dying for the inevitable. They're not going to take Ukraine. They might occupy chunks of this, but it'll be an ongoing rolling horror, unless they're driven out for the next 2 decades. Because the Ukrainians aren't going to forgive and forget.
They're crowing. No, they're crowing about Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a city. I hesitate to even call it a city. It's a town.
Right.
It looks like a city because that's how their architecture is.
Right.
That old Soviet block, those high-rise buildings.
Yeah.
30,000 people.
Yeah.
If they try to occupy a town of 100,000, 200,000, much less a million or two, they don't have the capacity. They do not have the means to take these cities and hold them. They can take open ground. They can try. They can take little hamlets and villages, but they can't occupy a city. They're going to lose this war.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way they can win this war. And by the metrics of, will there be a country called Ukraine? Will it have access to the Black Sea?
Yes.
will
Right.
it hold most of its territory? And yes, it will. So this fatalism of the GOP and the Marjorie Taylor Greens of, Ukraine is destined to lose, so we shouldn't even try to support them. That's not true. That's just simply not true. The Ukrainians are going to win this war. They're going to survive this war. It's just a matter of how many more of them have to die before you break the back of Russia. And that is coming. That is coming. There may not be a number of casualties that will do the breaking of the back.
Yeah.
But when eventually it is clear that they are never going to take back places like Odessa, because you can't keep bombing a city and expect them to, welcome you with open arms.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. They have
Well,
turned
they
Odessa against them.
They still have
forever.
60,000 children that they've taken. I mean, we talk about the 112 or
That
so
too.
hostages that we're aware of that they still have, that the Hamas and Islamic State have in Gaza.
Mhm.
And Russia's sitting on top of 60,000 children that they are placing with, they're placing them God knows where, but the assumption is they're placing them with like Russian families to have their Ukrainian identity,
And they're
beaten
proud
out
of
of
it.
them.
They're
Yeah.
proud of it. They crow about it. They
Yeah.
say we have denazified. We forced them not to speak Ukrainian. We forced them to denounce their families, their country, what have you. The kids that do find their way back here from a variety of, there's a bunch of programs here
Exchanges
in
and-
Ukraine
right,
that try
yeah.
to find a way to get exchanged and try to get them back. And the stories these kids tell when they come back of being beaten in class by their Russian teachers, physically beaten, by forcing just the Ukrainian kids to stand up and say the Russian national anthem and all the rest of them, and pledge their allegiance to Russia and to the Kremlin. These guys are what they're doing to these children. It's ethnic cleansing. Full stop.
Yeah.
Ethnic cleansing. Tens of thousands of children. It is. Of course, the Ukrainians are not going to just forgive and forget.
Mm-mm.
They're not going to stop fighting, and they're never going to forgive Russia.
Right.
And all those who are defeatists saying that Ukraine can't win don't know the Ukrainian people, and they don't know what's happening here. This country, if we give them the arms, they will take back their territory. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Right.
You talk about the 4 or 5 guys coming up on 20 Russian soldiers. That's it, due in no small part, and not exclusively. They're not superhuman, but
Right.
they're determined.
Mhm.
They know why they're fighting. This is their land, and it makes all the difference in the world. When they talk about, Ukraine can't beat the great military might of Russia, well, they said the same thing about the Taliban.
Right.
They said, the Iraqi insurgency, beat the American military machine by wearing them down, by being determined, for fighting for their homes and their families.
Right.
They're not going to beat the Ukrainians.
Well, and
The
also
Ukrainians are gonna win.
again, I have my own feelings about Afghanistan being the graveyard of empires, because I think those wars always end when people realize, what the heck are we here? Why are we trying to take this area? Ukraine is a very fertile, very resource rich, very culturally rich. The people themselves are smart. These are not there's no wide open deserts or are difficult to traverse areas of Ukraine normally. So you can see why anybody would want it to be there. But for all this awful, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between it and Kansas some of the time. Because again, as far as the weather, the agriculture, the nature of that, it's crucial. Whereas somebody just yelled poppy fields. Yeah, that's the one thing in Afghanistan that everybody's fighting for.
It's a beautiful country, Afghanistan. It's the only other thing that Afghanistan has, and it's just one of these things. It's a tragic, set of circumstances. Is that it happens to be at the intersection of a bunch of empires that kind of try to traverse it. And since it's the high ground, and once you kind of can traverse it, if you're India and you're trying to go for China, or the subcontinent trying to go for China, or Central Asia trying to come down, or it's just this kind of transit access point. And that's their tragedy of Afghanistan, is that But you're absolutely 100% right. Aside from that and poppies and maybe a few gemstones and what have you, there's not a lot in Afghanistan. It's
more
lovely for tourism if there was stability, because it is beautiful, but there's not a lot there as opposed to Ukraine, which has so much to offer.
Right, exactly. But the point is, like, why stay? The Russians have a bigger reason to stay than anybody would have a reason to stay necessarily in Afghanistan as an outsider, right? So that's why the drive is different in that regard. Let's grab another question before we get to the end of the next break.
Sure thing. Yeah, I've got one from Connie Kelly here. Question for Philip. Have any of the power lines going into the nuclear plant been repaired to keep the plant from losing or from melting down if it loses its last source of coolant power?
Well, it's my understanding that the power lines aren't the issue; it's the water lines. Mm-hmm. And I know that what is it? The International Atomic Inspection Agency, IAEA. That they've been working very hard on keeping that going. So I don't think we're anywhere near a crisis point at Zaporizhzhia. So the big threat at Zaporizhzhia is that the Russians keep putting military assets there. That and, you know, what would happen if they did purposely cause a meltdown or some sort of event. But that would be on Russia's. That would be a willful thing. I don't think we are at a place right now where the Zaporizhzhia plant is at risk because of the infrastructure failing or because of a lack of technicians or what have you. So, but we shall see. Look, I mean, it's Europe's largest nuclear power plant, and a meltdown or some sort of catastrophe there would be disastrous for the entire continent. But as far as I understand it right now, they have both power and water.
Right. Well, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more of your questions. Meanwhile, check out Philip Bittner's YouTube channel where he's got his upcoming podcast, which is launching in another week or so. We'll see. I think.
Give or take.
Yeah. Like, subscribe while you're at it. Patreon.com/HalSparks, a great way to support the show. And of course, we have a little Venmo thing on the screen and all that kind of stuff. And super chats always help and are always welcome and help us sustain the show. Thank you so much. We'll be back right after this. Man, it's so friggin' weird, but,
what?
The border, all the talking points that we've seen lately on both sides of the issue, when they start to spike at extremity, like when they start verging into cruelty, verging into demonization and dehumanization of the other side of an argument. And softball Paul has a question too. I heard that Israel gave Ukraine some kind of air defense system they had not had before. I don't know that that's the case. They've been talking about some version of, like, an older version of Iron Dome, sharing something with them that might be related.
I don't think they've given.
They have not given them Iron Dome.
Yeah, but I did.
Yeah, they're talking about.
No,
it.
certainly not Iron Dome.
Yeah.
But
anytime the conversation starts to get into really, like, QAnon level or ACAB level conversations, that's when, like, that gets my hackles up. That's where I start going, like, this seems hinky. And not that people can't lose their crap and start being jerks and accuse the other side of an argument of base cruelty. Happens all the time. But when it starts to seem kind of uniform and the languaging gets the same, like they floated calling people who supported Ukraine warmongers last year, and I pointed it out. For about 3 weeks, there was a big thing online where they would call you a warmonger if you were protecting Ukraine. If you wanted Ukraine to get funding. Thank you. And thanks, Chicago.
Thank you.
And then it didn't work, so it faded away. But it was absolutely it was like a trial balloon for this talking point to see if it would stick, and it didn't, so they moved on to the next one. But everybody was doing it all at once. It came out, and
I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky, let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you? Chugga chugga choo choo. Woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together. Whether the weather is cloudy or stormy, I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! Hooray!
Welcome back. So Phil was holding up his was that
It's Patron.
Patron,
Little
the
Patron.
bomb sniffing dog, which has become a hero amongst the Ukrainians, and a character. He brought me a stuffed Patron.
Yeah.
That I is in a
Love Patron.
He's right at the we have this little like stair landing place that's like has no purpose in architecture, but it's just a good place to put something three-dimensional that's like relatively small that you pass by it every day, and it's right there. So
He's a cutie, that old Patron.
he is. Let's continue with questions, and I'll try and not eat up too much of the time. So, Johnny, what do we got?
Yeah, here's one from Nick Rich. Is the farmers' blockade of Ukraine goods into Poland affecting the economy in both countries?
I mean, it's not having an effect, but it's not devastating. It's not I mean, obviously it's going to have an effect on Ukraine's economy. I don't know if it's affecting Poland's economy significantly. Ironically, they are still sending dairy this direction. The Poles give the Ukrainians dairy, and the Ukrainians give Europe and Poland, by extension, grain. And that's been the real big issue with Polish farmers. Although I see, and I think I'm not the only one who sees this, I see the Russians' hands all over that.
Yeah.
They're all over that blockade. That is not a grassroots movement in Poland. That is being manipulated. That's being created. It is clearly Russian involvement in that industry in Poland. I wish the Poles would crack down harder on it. Polish officials have said repeatedly that we under our legal framework we can't exactly do it. We have you have the right to assembly, you have the right to protest, all that good stuff. There are pressures that could be brought to bear because it is clearly Russian interference. And one last note on that whole thing is, and this is, I've heard this from so many Ukrainians, to attack grain in particular for the Ukrainians is something really, really a sensitive topic because of the Holodomor and the forced famine of the 1930s, where bread and grain were like, if you could get your hands on grain, you treasured every little piece that you could get your hands on.
Right.
And this has been passed on down the generations. Food, especially grain, is taken very seriously in this country because of that famine. And to see it being thrown out onto Polish fields, it really makes Ukrainians angry, and it touches a nerve. So, and the Russians know that.
Yeah.
So that whole thing is being orchestrated. As far as real economic effects, I don't think it's significant.
Yeah. There was part of what came out about I think it was Apartment 21 and the Fuzzy Bear, Fancy Bear hacks and all that kind of stuff, and this new stuff that came out from iSoon was the background of like China's interaction with Russia and them kind of looking at what Russia was doing and going, we should do more of that in certain areas. So they talk openly about their working with these Russian hacker groups about stuff that they want to work on. And they're like, we could do this in our own country. And one of the things they talk about is not just farmer protests, but the yellow vest protests in France and some of the the right wing stuff around Marie Le Pen, certainly the Trump world stuff. They discuss how, like, look how the Russians were able to be very successful in promoting and pushing the yellow jacket protests in France to violence. Because the point isn't that workers don't have a right to protest and stuff. Their goal is to take any natural gripe you might have and elevate it to violence. Elevate it to cross the line.
Keep in mind that there's a long history of conflict between Ukraine and Poland as well.
Sure.
They've fought a lot of wars, those two countries, and the Russians know it very well. But
he's trying to gin it up.
I was talking about, but left left to their own devices, actually, the Poles and the Ukrainians. I've been to the Polish cemetery in Lviv, where there are thousands of Polish soldiers that are buried there from a war that was a war that happened between Poland and Ukraine in 1919 to 1921. And there is also there, though, a monument of the Ukrainian leader at the time, I believe it was Poroshenko, and the Polish leader at the time, laying flowers at that cemetery of Polish soldiers in an effort to seek reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russians know that perfectly well, so they're trying to rip that wound right back open.
Yeah, that was part of the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson. What he kept bringing up was that you could tell he was trying to plant some seeds on that. Interesting thing is, after that interview, Putin, basically mocked and derided Tucker Carlson. Apparently, Tucker Carlson has now responded in kind. He was on Lex Friedman's podcast and said that that Putin's justification using denazification of Ukraine was, quote, one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
Fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Fight.
Right.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
And he goes, I hate the whole conversation because it's not real calling the Ukrainians Nazis. It's just ad hominem. It's a way of associating people with an evil regime that doesn't exist anymore. Now, granted, this is a guy who had a head writer when he worked at Fox who wrote like anti-Semitic and racist, pro-white propaganda on websites that went well beyond the I'm happy to be Irish, level of stuff to the white people should be running the world level of things. And it was his head writer. And the idea that he didn't know is just ridiculous because he hired the guy specifically. He brought him on. So come on. Yeah. Come on.
But perfectly
I'm fine
happy
with them.
to see Tucker.
I'm fine with their
Tucker
backbiting.
dissing Putin and Putin. Yeah, all for it.
Yep.
I'm here for it.
And by the way, that's where the disinfo.
Either, but.
Right, that's where the disinfo campaigns break down because there's always the human element. Like I was talking about with transportation, because trucks got to get across real ground. You cannot beat the physics, and the same thing is true about disinformation campaigns. If people would just practice a minor level of information hygiene, check yourself before you wreck yourself when you're reading something, and weigh it against your own sense of reality and complexity that exists in the world, and go, am I getting a full picture even here? That will help you immensely.
And if I can add, also as somebody who worked in media for a very long time, ostensibly still does, if you get an initial very strong emotional, like a visceral response to the headline or to the first paragraph, get another source. Find another source and check it against whatever, because the hook that gets you involved is to get you really upset about something, is to elicit a strong emotional response. That's how they get you.
Well, that's
you have that initial response.
Exactly. It's like that's what I was saying about the like the Yellow Jacket thing. You take a genuine issue, and the Israel-Palestinian conflict is a great example. You take something that was almost, there was, for whatever people believe about Netanyahu buying the peace or funding Hamas and all that nonsense, the reality was that they were effectively buying the peace, and they were allowing more Palestinians to have day passes and work passes and stuff, and they were opening this up. They were starting the arduous process amongst, by the way, continued bombing from Gaza into Israel, stopped by the Iron Dome, but still missiles, rockets fired in. They were trying these steps to try mitigate this up to October 7th. The idea is that Russia's entire game, in many ways China's game, and they do it more in Africa than they do it anywhere else, is to take civil unrest, civil war potential in any country and tip it towards violence through through message control and through pushing, the extremes of any group to violence. And it's worked in several countries. Anytime you're seeing riots and stuff, you can see sort of the kind of the hand of this at work, passively or actively. And Iran knows it too. That's why Iran blames the U.S. whenever something happens in their country, because they think we give these people hope, and with hope they'll fight. There's a difference between what the Russians do, which is just create enemies on both sides. We don't care about either side. We'll gin up the message on both.
But to also quickly circle back to that earlier question about, Israel maybe giving something to Ukraine in the form of, a new Patriot system or an Iron Dome stuff. That may be because we are seeing a solidification between the relationship between Hamas and the Kremlin. Not that it hasn't existed before, but it's been in the shadows.
Yep.
I think the Israelis are starting to wake up to the idea that Moscow is on the side of Hamas, and so they may go, okay, you're going to support Hamas. We might do a few things for the Ukrainians, which, as somebody who lives on Ukrainian soil, I'm here for.
Right. We got 2 minutes left, so let's grab one more question if we can. So we don't,
quick one.
Yeah, Johnny, what we've got?
Sure thing. I've got one from Sultan Greece. Does Phil have any comments about the Navalny stories or any comments?
I mean, it's good to see 10,000 people. That's the estimate I saw. You saw the intimidation by the regime. They having to march past guys with batons and battle rattle, clear intimidation. I was not a fan of Navalny. I am concerned now, however, about other dissidents who are held not only in Russia, like Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is actually a Democrat. He actually wants to see democracy brought to Russia, or for that matter, Mikhail Saakashvili in Georgia, which is a puppet of Moscow, or in Belarus. They're starting to kill dissidents at an increased rate, and I don't know if that is a big middle finger up to the West or what, but I'm deeply concerned that we're going to see a lot more dissidents dying, Navalny having just been the start. And 10,000 is great to see, but I was out on Bolotnaya Square in 2012, 2011, where they had 30 to 60. They need a lot more people on the streets. Although those 10,000, I give them credit because
they have to be more brave today than they did back then because of the nature of the circumstance as well.
100%.
I appreciate you being here. Everybody check out Philip Bittner's YouTube page. Follow Johnny Million on It's Johnny Million on Twitch and YouTube. Infotainmentwars.com is my channel, and please subscribe. Today we're trying to hit 100K. And also, I think the thing to watch, Javier Milei, the weirdo Argentinian president, who the right seems to love, the right wing in the United States, is putting together a South American, community, a support summit for Ukraine this year.
Yep.
Watch for that talking point to work its way awkwardly through the right wing in the United States. We'll be back next week.
Call Speaker Johnson. Call Speaker Johnson. Call your elected officials.
That's right. Thanks so much. Everyone. Thanks, Phil. Thank you, Chicago.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we did it.
Appreciate it. Look at that. And I think, technically speaking, I'll worry about the kind of visuals of it next time, but audio-wise and as far as quality-wise, this seemed to be a solution. It seemed to
no lag.
We didn't have any of the other issues that we have, and a lot of times it's the video up and back down because I have to check the feed as I do it. So just offloading that onto another computer seems to be the thing. It means I have to carry 2 computers with me, but there are worse problems to have. So,
do you think a tablet could do it instead?
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well.
It might eventually.
Yeah, no, I've had to carry 2. I've had to carry 2 computers. It's no fun.
Yeah. It's okay. I mean, there are worse problems.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not dead tonight, Hal.
Huh?
Have fun, yeah. Have a good show tonight.
I will. Nerd Halen tonight.
Break a leg.
Grapevine right down the road, right down over here. I have a little shuttle that's going to take me there in a little bit. Although we don't have sound check for another couple hours, so I'm going to go back to sleep and save my voice.
Oh, nap. Yeah.
So much love. Thank you guys. Take care.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Yes, I insist. Cool.
See you, Johnny. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.
What the hell? I'll go back to me. There we go. Hi, chat room, by the way. How you doing, guys? Yeah, I'm a sleepy boy today. Oddly enough, for whatever reason, in the middle of this, my mouse, my cursor on my computer started to like move on my iPad, which was weird. I don't know why. All of a sudden. And where it was as an extension was on the wrong side of the computer. So I was like, I can't get my mouse back. So it was right about the time I was like, everything worked so well. And then So love you guys. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go rest my voice and everything for the show tonight. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else, and I will see you guys on Monday for sure. There may be a possibility that tomorrow that I do a that tomorrow I might do one of the Trump rallies again, do a full one, because Jesus. But perhaps cut me some slack if I don't, because tomorrow's a travel day as well. So much love. At the very least, I will definitely see you on Monday. So bye, everybody. Thanks so much for the super chats. Thank you guys. Hit that like on your way out, or if you didn't on your way in. And there you go. And chat room's raging. Bye. Okay, bye. All right, thanks.